The silent woman behind the genius. The air was still in Chennai that morning, warm and thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the hum of street vendors setting up for the day. But on a small, cracked street, far from the buzzing highways and boardrooms of Silicon Valley, a woman stood quietly outside a modest iron gate. She wore a simple cotton sari, its faded blue pattern fluttering slightly in the breeze, and her eyes held the weight of 1,000 prayers. Her name was Lakshmi, and she was Sundar Pichai's mother. For most of the world, Sundar was a tech giant, the CEO of Google, the man who redefined innovation. But for Lakshmi, he was still her boy, the quiet child who once cried when a neighbor's kitten went missing, the boy who read science books by candlelight during the city's frequent power cuts. Today, she waited outside his childhood home. There was no crowd, no reporters, no grand announcement, just her, waiting. Years before this moment, in a one-room home filled with books, a young Sundar sat cross-legged on the floor, assembling a broken radio. His father, Raghunathan, watched with pride while his mother folded clothes beside him. Money was tight. Their home had no refrigerator, no television, luxuries they couldn't afford. Yet the air inside that home was rich with love, ambition, and the soft whispers of dreams. "Why do you want to fix that radio?" his mother asked. Sundar didn't look up. "Because I want to know how it speaks." That one sentence told Lakshmi everything. Her son wasn't just curious, he was different. He didn't just want to use things. He wanted to understand them. Every evening, as the power flickered off, Sundar would light a kerosene lamp and read until his eyes watered. He memorized transistor circuits, studied engineering texts far beyond his age, and asked questions even his teachers couldn't answer. The invisible support system. Lakshmi rarely talked about the sacrifices. The days she skipped meals to afford his entrance exam fees. The nights she worked on neighbors' sewing jobs under dim light. She never complained when Sundar's school bag grew heavier with borrowed books, or when his worn sandals needed replacing, but had to last another season. She believed in him. She believed so deeply that even when the neighbors mocked her, too much studying will make him sick, they said, she ignored them. Her son was going to reach somewhere they had never imagined. And he did. A letter that changed everything. When the letter came, Sundar was in disbelief. He had been accepted to Stanford, the dream of every student, but impossible for a boy whose family could barely afford a train ticket to Delhi. He held the paper in his trembling hands. "Amma," he whispered, "we need to talk." Lakshmi took the letter and read it slowly, her lips moving silently with each word. She looked up with tears in her eyes and smiled. "We'll find a way. They sold jewelry, they borrowed from friends. Sundar's father even mortgaged the tiny home they had built with decades of labor. No one forced them. They did it willingly, silently, because they knew this moment might never come again." Lakshmi handed Sundar a small tiffin box before he left for America. "There's nothing in it," she said softly, "but one day you'll fill it with what the world gives you and bring it back." He didn't understand what she meant. Not then. From nothing to everything, America was cold. Strange. Loud. Sundar worked night shifts in libraries, slept on borrowed mattresses, and walked miles to attend classes. But inside those quiet walls of Stanford, he soared. He built projects that dazzled professors, impressed peers, and earned respect that reached beyond the campus gates. When he joined Google, he wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing the same curiosity that once made him fix a broken radio. His rise was slow, steady, and filled with moments where he listened more than he spoke, observed more than he acted, and learned more than he taught. He never forgot the silence of his home in Chennai. He never forgot the woman who stitched dreams into his clothes. The return now, years later, he returned, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO. He returned as a son. Lakshmi stood outside the gate, not because she was locked out, but because she still believed in old traditions. She didn't want to step into the house until Sundar, now the owner of that same home, invited her in. Inside, the entire neighborhood had gathered. The old men from the tea stall, the children who now used smartphones designed by Sundar's teams, and the teachers who once stayed late to tutor him, all waited in awe. But Sundar didn't speak to them first. He walked up to his mother, bowed deeply, and touched her feet. "You stood here for me," he said, tears rolling down. "Now I want the whole world to see who built me." The gift she never asked for. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the streets of Chennai in shades of golden orange. The narrow lanes were quieter now, but a soft murmur of excitement still floated through the air. Sundar Pichai's homecoming had changed something, not just for his family but for the entire neighborhood. For the first time in years, the Miao residents of that old street felt like they mattered, but Sundar's eyes were only on one person, his mother Lakshmi. She had spent her whole life giving. Not once had she asked for anything. Not once had she told him what she needed. But Sundar had always seen it. Every quiet sacrifice, every skipped meal, every time she folded his old clothes so carefully, as if they were made of gold. And now, he had planned something she could never expect. The phone call that changed everything. A few months before his return, Sundar made a call. "Hello?" he said quietly. "This is Sundar Pichai. I need your help." Not for me. For my mother. He wasn't calling a friend or a colleague. He was calling an architect, but not just any architect. One of the most respected designers in India. Someone who had created homes for presidents, cultural landmarks, even award-winning eco-residences. Sundar didn't want a mansion or a palace. He wanted a home. One built on love. On memories. On every detail his mother had once dreamed of but buried under years of responsibility. "Can you build a place that feels like the old one but without the pain?" he asked. The architect was silent for a moment. "For your mother, Mr. Pichai?" "Absolutely. The blueprint of dreams." Over the following weeks, the old neighborhood buzzed with mysterious visitors. Men with measuring tools. Women noting down light angles and water flow. And most curious of all, a gentle elderly man who asked the neighbors strange questions like, did Sundar's mother like to sit near the mango tree? Where did she usually hang wet clothes to dry? Which window did she look out from during the rains? No one understood why, but they answered anyway. Sundar was designing not just a house but a tribute, a monument to motherhood hidden in simple walls and shaded verandas. He told the architect, "I don't want my mother to know. I want her to see it when it's ready, and when she steps in, I want her to feel the past and the future at the same time." The reveal months passed. The sun rose and fell over the construction site like a silent guardian. Locals whispered and watched. Some even tried to peek over the walls. But the workers were discreet, respectful. Not a single photo leaked. Not a single plan was shared. And then came the day. Sundar invited Lakshmi out for a walk. "Just a simple walk around the neighborhood," he said. She hesitated. She didn't like the attention. "Amma," he said, softly holding her hand. "Please." "Just once," she agreed. They walked slowly, passing old tea stalls and cracked pavements. People stared. Some smiled, some waved. Sundar nodded politely. Lakshmi, shy and unsure, kept her eyes down. But when they turned the final corner, she stopped. Before her stood a house she didn't recognize, but somehow knew. It wasn't the tiny old one-room structure she had lived in, and yet, the mango tree still stood tall in the backyard. The front step had the same curve where Sundar used to sit with his books. The wind chime at the door sounded like the one she had lost years ago. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's yours," Sundar said, tears forming in his eyes. Walking through memories, she stepped in. Her feet touched marble, but not the cold, shiny kind. This marble was warm, sun-kissed, textured like river stones. The hall was filled with light. Not artificial, not forced, natural sunlight pouring in from skylights above. The kitchen had the same clay spice jars she once used. The walls were painted in earth tones, soft yellows and greens. Each room had windows that framed the world exactly how Lakshmi liked to see it. On one wall, Sundar had placed a framed photo. It was a simple image, Lakshmi holding a young Sundar, by the shoulders, both smiling, both unaware someone had clicked it. Beneath the frame were 3 words, "She made me." Lakshmi couldn't speak. For years, she had carried bags heavier than her strength. She had hidden her hunger to feed her children. She had sold her wedding bangles to send her son abroad, and now, without asking, without hinting, she was being given something beyond her wildest dreams. Not just a house, but recognition, honor, love, loud and public, from a son who had once been too shy to even say thank you out loud. The media arrives, news spread quickly. An international CEO had built a hidden mansion in his old neighborhood. No, not a mansion. A modest home. A soulful sanctuary for his mother. Headlines began to appear. Sundar Pichai's greatest invention. A home for his mother. From one room to heaven, tech leader honors his roots. The house built on love. Sundar Pichai's tribute to Amma. But Sundar refused all interviews. "This is not for cameras," he said. "This is for my mother." What the world didn't know. That night, after all the lights were off and the world had stopped buzzing about the story, Lakshmi sat on the veranda of her new home. Sundar brought her tea, just like she had done for him so many years ago. "Do you remember the time you walked me to school in the rain?" he asked. She smiled. "I remember you slipped in the mud, and still wouldn't let go of your book." He laughed softly. They sat together in silence for a long while. Then Lakshmi asked, "Sundar, why all this?" He looked at her and replied, "Because, Amma, you gave me a life. I wanted to give you a world." She wiped her eyes with the edge of her sari. "You already did, son. The day you hugged me in front of the gate. A global message. What Sundar didn't plan was what would happen next." Emails poured in. From young people. From mothers. From sons who had left home and daughters who missed theirs. One message read, "I watched your story with my mother. We cried together. For the first time in 10 years, I told her how much I love her." Another came from a teacher in Brazil. "Your story reminded my students that success without gratitude is empty. Thank you for making love the headline." The letter in the box rain whispered gently against the tiled rooftop of Lakshmi's new home, a rhythm that echoed the past. The world outside buzzed with headlines, but inside the quiet house, Sundar Pichai and his mother sat in peaceful silence. Tea steamed from clay cups. The smell of roasted peanuts and ghee drifted through the air. Lakshmi's new kitchen looked modern, but every corner carried the memory of her old habits. Small jars, copper pans, and a stone grinder she refused to part with. The past few weeks had been overwhelming for her. Strangers now greeted her with folded hands. Television vans had come and gone, hoping for a glimpse or quote. But Lakshmi had remained silent. Her son had given her everything, and yet she felt the weight of something left unsaid. And then, on a humid afternoon, as she was unpacking an old trunk, she found it. A letter. The forgotten box. In a corner of the storage room stood a rusted trunk. Not modern, not impressive. Just an old metal box that had traveled with the family from house to house over the years. It held clothes no one wore, utensils too bent to use, school books with yellowed pages. Lakshmi opened it not out of need, but curiosity. She lifted an old shawl, a cracked mirror, and a bundle of childhood photos. And under them, folded carefully in a plastic wrapper, was an envelope. The paper had turned brittle with time. The ink on the front had faded, but she recognized the handwriting instantly. It was hers. "To my Sundar, for when he is ready," her hands trembled. She didn't even remember writing it. Perhaps it had been in a moment of emotion long before he left for America, before he became someone the world knew. Slowly, she opened it. The letter she never meant to send, "My dear Sundar. I do not know when you will read this. Maybe after many years, maybe never. I write this because I do not speak much. Not because I don't want to, but because I worry I will say too much. You are different, my son. Since you were small, I saw in your eyes a hunger. Not for food, but for understanding. I do not know what your life will become. I only pray that you stay kind, stay curious, and never forget who you are. If you ever succeed, and I believe you will, don't build statues or name buildings. Just build people. Help those who carry heavy dreams but have no one to lift them. Help the children who don't speak English but dream in it. And when you do something for your mother, don't make it about luxury. Make it about love. Love. Lakshmi sat there for a long time, the letter resting on her lap like a sleeping child. She remembered writing it now. It had been during a stormy night when Sundar was preparing for his entrance exams. He had fallen asleep on his books, and she had stayed awake watching him by the candlelight. She never gave him the letter, but now he needed to see it. Sundar reads the letter that evening. As the monsoon clouds rumbled softly, Lakshmi called her son to the courtyard. No reporters, no cameras, just the two of them, like it used to be. She handed him the letter without a word. He read it once, then again, and then again, slowly. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. "Amma," he whispered, "you knew everything. Even before it happened." She smiled faintly. "I didn't know the world, Sundar, but I knew you." He folded the letter carefully and pressed it to his heart. "Then let me do the one thing you asked." A journey begins. The very next week, Sundar canceled several meetings. His assistants were puzzled. The press speculated wildly. But he told no one where he was going. He flew not to a tech conference, but to a rural school in Tamil Nadu. It was a place where the roofs leaked, the walls were cracked, and the computers hadn't worked in years. Students still learned with chalk and wooden slates. Some walked barefoot for miles just to attend class. Sundar walked into a classroom unannounced. The teacher stopped mid-sentence. The children stared. He smiled and sat on the floor with them. "May I learn with you today?" he asked. A small girl raised her hand. "But aren't you the Google uncle?" He laughed gently. "Today I'm just someone who wants to learn again." The School of Dreams, Sundar didn't stop there. He visited 5 schools across 3 states, each more forgotten than the last. He asked students what they wanted, not just in school, but in life. Some wanted to be scientists. Some wanted to become dancers. One boy whispered, "I want to fix my village's water pump." Sundar took notes, listened, observed. Then he returned home and gathered his team, not of executives, but of educators, engineers, and volunteers. He created a plan, not a publicity stunt, not a foundation with his name in gold, just a mission: build people, quietly, powerfully, forever. The Amma Initiative. Named after the letter that inspired it, the Amma Initiative was launched 6 months later. Its goal was simple: provide smart classrooms in rural areas, offer tech scholarships for underprivileged children, train village teachers with modern tools, and ensure girls were given equal access and support. But here's what made it different. It never used Sundar's face in the promotion. Instead, it showed pictures of students, teachers, mothers. The tagline: "Your dream is our device." When Sundar showed Lakshmi the first video of the program, she said nothing at first. Then quietly she touched his hand. "This is the real home you built, Sundar." Stories from the ground soon. Stories started pouring in. A girl who had never touched a computer became a coding champion in Kerala. A deaf boy in Uttar Pradesh used speech software to win a science fair. A retired farmer in Gujarat started teaching robotics to village kids after receiving training. Each of them, in some way, carried a spark, fueled by a stranger who sat with them on the floor once and listened. The world takes notice, but Sundar stays silent. Global media began reporting on the Amma Initiative. Articles appeared in Forbes, BBC, even Al Jazeera, but Sundar declined every interview. "This is not about me," he said. "This is about the letter in the box." A gift returned one morning, Sundar found a package at his doorstep. There was no sender name, just a note. "Your letter helped my daughter dream. I'm sending one back." Inside was a small envelope. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Dear sir, I may never meet you, but because of you I now teach my village kids. I was once a street cleaner. Now I teach. I found a letter in your story, so here is mine. If ever you feel tired or doubt your path, please read this and remember, your kindness reached even where the internet had not." Muthu, age 62 Sundar, closed his eyes and held the letter to his heart. He had built products that changed how the world searched. But now, he was helping them find themselves. The woman in the last row. The auditorium was filled to the brim. In a quiet town in Karnataka, hundreds of students, teachers, and parents had gathered for the launch of a new AMA initiative Smart Center. It was the fourth such launch this month, and yet Sundar Pichai treated each one like the first. He stood on the stage wearing a simple shirt and slacks. No suit, no fanfare. Beside him, children clutched books, some in uniform, some barefoot. Their eyes sparkled with the kind of hope that can only grow in places long forgotten. As the speeches ended, the audience clapped politely. Some stood to take pictures. Reporters shuffled for quotes. But Sundar's eyes were scanning the crowd. Something felt different. And then he saw her, a woman in the last row, quiet, still. Eyes locked on him, not with admiration or excitement, but something deeper, something familiar, haunting memory. That night, as the event ended and guests returned to their villages, Sundar stayed back, unusually quiet. He looked at the empty stage, then at the last row where she had sat. She was gone. But her face stayed in his mind, because it looked like someone from long ago, back in Chennai, years ago. He was just a boy, maybe 10, standing at the school gate, with torn slippers and a soaked uniform. It had rained hard that day and he had forgotten his umbrella. His mother hadn't come yet, delayed by work. The security guard ignored him. Other children had drivers or parents waiting in cars. He stood alone, shivering. And then, from behind the school wall, a hand reached out holding a large leaf. A woman, her sari soaked, her hands weathered from labor, smiled at him gently. She didn't speak, just held the leaf above his head like a tiny umbrella. "You shouldn't get wet," she said. He nodded, confused. She stayed until Lakshmi came rushing through the gate. Then quietly the woman walked away. He never saw her again. Until now. Searching for the unknown, driven by a restless feeling, Sundar began asking around. He described her to the volunteers, the teachers, even the village elders. Older woman, wheatish skin, white streak in her hair, eyes that carry storms. No one seemed to know until one girl raised her hand. "I think she works in the village clinic, helps clean, doesn't speak much." That was enough. The next day, Sundar showed up at the clinic, not in a car, not with bodyguards, just with a bottle of water and a folded piece of paper in his pocket. He waited silently at the corner, and there she was, sweeping the front steps. A quiet reunion. She looked up, startled. "Do you remember me?" Sundar asked softly. She tilted her head, unsure. "Many years ago. In Chennai. A boy. Outside the school gate. You held a leaf above his head." Her eyes widened. "You remember that?" He nodded. "I've never forgotten." She stared at him for a moment, then looked down. "Why would you remember something so small?" He replied. "Because when the world ignored me, you saw me. That wasn't small. A name lost in time. Her name was Shanti. She had been a migrant worker in Chennai in the 90s. Widowed with a small child, she moved from town to town doing cleaning jobs. She had seen Sundar many times outside the school, often alone, often quiet. "You reminded me of my son," she said. "Always dreaming, always wet in the rain." Sundar asked where her son was now. She sighed. "He passed away. Fever. There was no doctor nearby. It happened so fast. He held her hand gently. Shanti Amma, may I do something for you now? She smiled. You already did, my boy. You remembered. The forgotten caretaker's back in his office. Sundar sat down and began drafting something new. Not a tech product, not a keynote speech, but a plan. The Amma initiative was growing fast, but now it needed a new branch, Amma Guardians. This part of the mission would honor women like Shanti, caretakers, widows, cleaners, cooks, forgotten women who kept villages running without being seen. Under the Amma Guardians program, women would receive monthly stipends. They'd be trained in first aid, child nutrition, and education support. Their children and grandchildren would get scholarships, and most importantly, they would be named, recognized, celebrated. The first badge of honor was given to Shanti, not with fanfare, but in a quiet school assembly. She wore a white sari and held a small plaque in her hand. On it was written, "For the woman who held the leaf and carried the storm." The media responds again. The media picked up the story. They loved the headline, "From Tech Titan to Village Son, Sundar Pichai's Silent Revolution," but Sundar still refused interviews. He issued one statement. Sometimes we look for heroes, in books and screens, but often their sweeping steps or boiling rice or walking children to school. This country was built on their backs. Now we lift them. A visit from the president weeks later, Sundar was invited to meet the president of India. He expected a brief handshake. Instead, the president paused and said, "Mr. Pichai, I read about your Amma Guardians, and I want you to know, my own mother was a woman like Shanti." They spoke for an hour. No policies, no politics, just about mothers. Lakshmi watches from afar back in Chennai. Lakshmi watched it all from a small television in her living room. Report after report showed her son, not in boardrooms, but in broken schools and dusty lanes, and every time she saw him standing beside a child, an old woman or a tired teacher, she smiled quietly and whispered to herself, "My Sundar, you listened." She opened the letter she had written long. Ego again. Not to read it, but to tuck in another piece of paper beneath it, a new note. The new letter. The monsoon had passed. Leaves were still wet from the morning drizzle, and puddles shimmered across the courtyard like tiny mirrors. In the quiet of dawn, Lakshmi sat on her wooden chair with a notebook on her lap. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from age but from the weight of what she was about to write. Years ago, she had written a letter to her son, Sundar Pichai, a letter he only found recently. That letter had shaped his heart, his mission, and perhaps even the fate of thousands of children across India. But now, as the world celebrated him for his humility and service, Lakshmi felt it was time to tell him one more truth, one she had buried deeply, one she was afraid to speak out loud, writing through silence in her notebook. She wrote slowly, pressing each letter with purpose. Outside, birds chirped, and the wind carried the smell of wet earth. Her new home was peaceful, more beautiful than she had ever dreamed. But today her thoughts weren't about comfort or walls. They were about the little boy who once held her hand while crossing puddles, the boy who now held nations in his influence. This was the letter she never thought she would write, but now she had no choice. The letter, "My dearest Sundar, you once read a letter I had forgotten I wrote. And now I write another, one I will not forget. I must tell you a truth. Not because it changes what you've done, but because it shows who you truly are. There was a time, long ago, when I almost gave up. You were just a child. Your father had lost his job. We had no income. One evening I stood outside a temple with you asleep in my arms. I had 1 rupee left. I remember thinking, I can buy milk or I can buy a bus ticket to go beg your uncle for help. I chose the milk. But that night I cried silently beside you. I believed I had failed as a mother. And then, you opened your eyes in the middle of the night, and you said, "Amma, one day I will buy you a house so big it will have stars inside." You didn't know what you were saying, but that one line pulled me back from the edge. And look now, your house has stars in the ceiling and light in every room. But that's not why I'm writing. I'm writing to say thank you, not for the house, not for the fame, but for keeping your promise as a son. And there's one last thing. In the back of your father's old toolbox, under a pile of newspapers, there is a photograph. I want you to find it. Love, Amaya. Search begins. When Sundar received the letter, the next morning he didn't wait. He went straight to the small tool cupboard tucked away in the corner of the house. The box hadn't been opened in years. Its hinges were rusted and it smelled faintly of engine oil and dust. Inside he found what looked like old repair manuals, broken screws, bits of copper wire, and a bundle of yellowing newspapers tied with string. He untied it, and there it was. Single photograph, faded at the edges. It showed a younger Lakshmi, perhaps in her early 20s, standing beside a man Sundar had never seen before. Tall with glasses, wearing a cotton shirt and a warm smile. In her arms, a baby. Sundar stared at it, confused. He had always thought he knew his past. But this was different. A mother's truth. That night, as rain began to fall again outside, Sundar sat with his mother on the veranda. He held the photo in his hand. Amma, he asked gently. Who is this? Lakshmi took a deep breath. That was your real uncle. Not your father's brother. My own brother. His name was Vijayan. Sundar blinked. But why have I never heard of him? She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Because he was taken from us too soon. A story from the shadows. Vijayan was a school teacher in a tribal village. He taught science and maths in places where children had never even seen a globe. He was passionate, bold, and often traveled to remote areas without any concern for danger. He once brought a radio to a village where electricity hadn't reached yet. He powered it with solar panels made from discarded glass. He dreamed of opening a free science school for tribal children. He called it the School of Stars, Lakshmi said softly, because he wanted them to reach for the sky. One day, he was traveling to deliver supplies during a flood. His boat capsized, his body was never found. After his death, Lakshmi whispered, I promised myself I would raise a son who would carry on his dreams. And I chose your name, Sundar, because he believed the world needed more beauty. Sundar sat silently, his throat tight. Everything he had become was part of a story older than him. The School of Stars. That night, Sundar didn't sleep. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop, not to check emails but to create something new, a program inspired by Vijayan. The next morning, he called a meeting with the Amma Initiative Board. We're launching something new, he said. The Vijayan Mission. Everyone listened quietly as he explained. The Vijayan Mission. This mission would be dedicated to building science labs in tribal and forest schools, training local teachers in modern experiments using recycled materials, creating mobile science, vans that could reach the most remote areas, starting a radio station that broadcasted science in native tribal languages. The symbol of the mission? A simple photo of Vijayan, hand-raised before a chalkboard with the words, Teach the stars, even where the skies are dark. Sundar funded the first 10 schools from his own personal account, and when asked about the reason, he said only one sentence. I wasn't the beginning of this story. I was the continuation. The power of legacy. Over the next few months, the Vijayan mission grew rapidly. Photos and videos began surfacing from deep forests and mountaintops, tribal children learning about space, gravity, chemistry. Tiny huts turned into science hubs. Local mothers joined the classes to learn with their children. One video showed a girl building a solar lamp using scrap parts. In another, a tribal elder read weather patterns from a tablet. In one village, they painted a message on the wall in bright colors. Uncle Vijayan, we are learning, we are dreaming. A gift for Lakshmi on her birthday. Sundar brought Lakshmi a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver pendant, shaped like a star. Engraved on it were the words, School of Stars, Amma No, Row 1. She held it to her chest, smiling with tears in her eyes. You found your uncle's dream, she said. No, Sundar replied. I found mine. The final speech. The sun rose gently over New Delhi, as a cool breeze stirred the flags outside the International Convention Center. It was not an ordinary day. Hundreds of the world's most powerful thinkers, innovators, and leaders were arriving to attend the Global Future Forum, an annual summit where visionaries shared ideas that could shape humanity's next chapter. This year's keynote speaker was announced months ago, but no one expected him to say what he was about to say. Sundar Pichai stood backstage, quietly breathing, holding a small folded note in his hand, one he hadn't shown to anyone. Outside, the crowd buzzed with anticipation. Presidents, journalists, and students from 50 countries were seated. Yet in Sundar's heart, only one face mattered, his mother's, and the final words she had written to him in that second letter, a message written in silence. Use the light they give you to shine on those still sitting in darkness, but don't speak to impress the world. Speak to remind them that even stars were once hidden in dust. That was the final line she had written, and that line shaped the speech he was now about to deliver. The stage is set. A soft chime rang through the auditorium. Sundar walked slowly onto the stage. No spotlight, no music, just the quiet sound of shoes on polished wood and the hush of thousands holding their breath. He didn't carry a slideshow, no data charts, no product teasers, only the small note from his mother, folded neatly in his breast pocket. He looked up at the crowd. Then, without waiting, he began. I am not here because of me. His voice was calm, soft. Today I want to share a story, he said. Not of success, but of sacrifice. Not of a company, but of a woman who stood outside a gate. He told them about Lakshmi, about the night she had 1 rupee and chose milk instead of help, about the time she stitched clothes until her fingers bled so he could have his first calculator, about how she waited outside his school during storms, pretending to sell flowers just to be near him in case he got hurt. People in the crowd looked at each other stunned. This was not a business speech. This was something else. Something real. I am the result of 1,000 unseen hands, Sundar continued, now more personal. There was a woman named Shanti who held a leaf over my head during a storm. A teacher named Vijayan who never lived to see his school of stars. A boy in a tribal village who built a fan from broken wires, so his grandmother could sleep peacefully. These people never went viral. They never trended. They never got awards. But they are the reason I am here. The hall was silent. Some listeners were already wiping tears. Others were writing notes furiously, trying to keep up. Not with numbers, but with emotions. I once believed the future was made of code. But now I know, he said softly. The future is made of compassion. He spoke of the Amma initiative, how it had reached more than 2,000 schools. Of the Amma Guardians, where unsung women were finally being honored for the work that held entire villages together. Of the Vijayan mission, which now had vans crossing deserts and forests, delivering science and dreams where hope had long stopped knocking. None of these programs carry my name, Sundar said, because the world doesn't need more monuments to people, it needs bridges for children. A voice from the crowd as he paused, a voice called out, Mr. Pichai, what made you change your path from tech to humanity? Sundar smiled gently. 1 line, he said, from a letter. He pulled the folded note from his pocket and read, Make it about love. A surprise in the audience as he stepped down from the stage. The crowd rose in applause. People clapped not just out of admiration but with genuine emotion. But Sundar's eyes didn't search for the cameras or the reporters. He scanned the last row. And there she was. His mother, Lakshmi. Not in a special seat, not on a stage, but sitting quietly in the very last row, wearing a simple sari, her eyes filled with tears and pride. He walked up to her, stepped off the main stage completely, and knelt in front of her. The entire audience gasped. And then, Sundar did something that would be replayed millions of times in the days to come. He kissed his mother's feet. Not in ceremony, but in gratitude. The world watches in silence. The moment was not choreographed. No PR team had approved it. Yet it spread like fire. Within hours, headlines around the globe read, Tech CEO bows to his mother after emotional speech. reminds the world what real success is. From Silicon Valley to mother's feet, Sundar Pichai's gesture leaves global leaders in awe. Love, not luxury. Sundar Pichai's message melts hearts at Global Summit. Returning home. A few weeks later, Sundar returned to Chennai, not as a guest, but as a son. He visited his childhood neighborhood again. The streets were cleaner now. A statue of a teacher had been placed at the corner of the road, Vijayan's face carved in stone, smiling down at the school children who walked by every morning. But Sundar didn't stop there. He visited Shanti once more, this time with a surprise. "Shanti Amma," he said gently, "we've built a community kitchen in your name, and your granddaughter will be our first Amma scholar abroad." She broke down in tears. The boy who promised stars that night, Lakshmi and Sundar, sat on the same veranda where so much had begun. He looked at the stars above and whispered, "Amma, you remember what I told you when I was a child? That I'd give you a home with stars inside?" She nodded. He pointed to the glowing garden lights twinkling faintly in the misty air. "There they are." Lakshmi laughed, wiping her eyes. "You kept your promise, my son." But Sundar shook his head. "No, Amma, I'm still keeping it." Final note, in the months that followed, more lives were changed than ever before through Sundar's initiatives, but he kept his face out of the spotlight. When asked why, he said, "The world already knows me. It's time they know who made me." And perhaps that is what greatness looks like, not building empires for the world to see, but lifting people no one sees. The end.